Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of CookieCast. And what a special episode we've got for you. This is episode 300 of The Darkest Timeline. What better way to celebrate than to get a guest? Yes, I know, it does sometimes happen. Sometimes being a loose word when it comes to this podcast, that is, because I don't often get guests. But as it was the 300th episode, I was like, hey, I'm getting a guest. What better guest to get than my partner in crime, my podcast wife, the man who's been there since the start and has been woven all the way through the podcast, Mr. Paul Williams. We'll get into podcasting, what it means, why we do it. Is it easy to fit in around a family? These are hard-hitting questions. Then we get into the fun stuff. We play a little game. It spans 2 other sections of podcast. And I don't know, I thought it was good. I thought it was fun. I thought it was enjoyable. Before we get into this, little caveat. This will be uploaded as the 300th episode, but it will be uploaded before the 2 or 3 that run up to 300, it's like 298, 299, whatever. It is the 300th. It's recorded as the 300th, but it will be uploaded and available before others. It's not a mix-up of numbers. It's just how I'm doing it. Before we start, please do consider like, share, subscribe, and comment. Leave a review where you can leave a review. Obviously, if this is your first time, click those buttons. If it's your 300th time and you haven't already clicked those buttons, it's probably time. Yeah? Anyway, let's get started. Here we go. This is CookieCast, The Darkest Timeline. Obviously, at this point in time, this is super confusing. Obviously, for those YouTube subscribers, they're like, I think there's been a problem with the upload. There's been a mix-up. Then they're like, I think the NFL season's in play at the moment. So then they're like, the title said Darkest Timeline Special 300 Episode. What is happening right now? So for your audio listeners, get yourself over to YouTube for this one, just this one. I understand, I keep it real for my audio listeners because I am also an audio podcast listener. Now that you're over on YouTube, you'll be able to see that there's video for a start. That's not a thing on The Darkest Timeline. And there's a guest. Now, this is not the first time we've had a guest. I've done special episodes before. Usually when I've managed to wrangle someone in either a lasso or a rope situation. However, for my 300th episode, I decided to bring in what I have decided to call from this point on my podcast wife. That's right. It's Mr. Paul Williams. He's never been on a podcast before, and this is his first. Oh, wait.
Yes, I'm very happy to be busting my podcast cherry with you, sir.
So we've got. I said to Paul, I was like, "Hey, episode 300 is coming up. I want to do something special, and there's only one way to truly celebrate, and that's to have the only person who's done nearly as many podcasts as me do another podcast." So Paul was like, "Sure, I'll get in from football and immediately jump on and do a podcast with you." That's exactly what I want to do in my evening after running around for 90 maybe minutes, 60, 14, 13 minutes.
Well, let's put it this way: we have the pitch booked for I suppose technically it's 55 minutes because we're not supposed to go on until like I think they naturally say you have like a 5 minute sort of like overlay period between the two games and stuff like that. So it's booked for 55 minutes. There's normally a fair amount of pissing about in choosing the teams. Fair enough, that's on me because I try to make it as fair as possible. Which usually entails me trying to work out who the worst player that's left of all the other players, and I basically try and sort of pair them off on the opposite side to me because I know that I'm the worst player that goes down of everybody. So I sort of like work from like the what I would class to be the least talented, and then build up from there.
Gone are the days where I used to spend my Monday afternoon sorting out Paul's Monday night football game for him, where I'm like, this person, I've never met this person, I don't know what their footballing ability is, but I'm putting them on this team. I'll be like, no. Like, cool, I'm putting them on this team. I had a 50-50 shot and I got it wrong.
I had forgotten that that actually used to take place. I used to bring over a post-it note. Obviously, other sticky note-based items are also available. But I used to bring Mr. Cook a list of the names that were down for the Monday Night Football, and he would very, very kindly split those names into two very evenly balanced teams. And then I'd of course say to him, "No, Andy, you put all the good players on one side there. Those teams will get absolutely murdered." So, it's that used to take it out of my hands.
The secret to it, I realised the secret was just divide up all the maths between the two teams, all four of them that used to be on that list, and be like, you get two mats and you get two mats, and then I just build it from there, and it basically all fall into place.
There used to be multiple mats. James was always a popular name. There was about 4 James.
Got to get James in there.
But a James W, a Jimmy, a Jim lad. So, but it's Jimbo. I used to have to try and sort of like separate up the names into a easy to understand retina, as it were.
Fond memories of a time long. We don't even work in that building anymore. But hey,
I would go so far as to say is that building isn't even an office anymore. That is now a hotel.
So I was like, let's break it down. Let's break down some podcast statistics. Because although it's not a NFL-based podcast or anything else that in fact has a statistical element, I thought it'd be interesting. So you might be able to correct me where I go wrong on this one, but I believe your first podcast episode was episode 2.
So, was I the first? Well, was I the first guest, or was Leanne technically the first guest?
Technically, Leanne was the first. I was going back, however many years it is now, 7+ years or something. I was just so completely terrified of actually making that leap that I was like, I need someone to hold my hand. Let's jump together. So me and Leanne like white knuckled the first episode. But I think in past conversations we have discussed the fact that I'm pretty sure if you go back, you're like the second episode. So I was like, there might be a mathematical equation to work out how many podcasts you've been on. So here we go. We have done over 1,000 episodes of podcasts in a variety of different forms. They are sports-based or, as in this scenario, Darkest Timeline and other such things. Some of the sports we don't feature on. And obviously not everybody's available at all times. I know there was a point in time where you'd have like some sort of Christmas crossover where you'd be like, on that day, I can't do it. So let's work on the principle of 1,000 because we're not trying to get an exact. Immediately, you can take off 300 Darkest Timelines. Straight down to the big 700. There are, we've just gone into series 4 of the Straight to the Apex podcast. So I'm going to estimate about, for rounding purposes, 25 episodes of the Straight to the Apex podcast. That's 75 off the 700, takes us down to 625. I was going to give the 25 extra for, I can't make it on that one. I am unavailable for this one. So I was like, does that mean that you have hit the region of 600 podcasts?
Well, honestly, when you like asked about how many I think I've been on, in my initial thought was, is it going to be about 50%? Because there was obviously like you say, like the first when you first started doing it, obviously the main sort of plan was to do different guests each week, or sort of like was it? I think weekly was your sort of your main idea when you first launched it.
Yeah. So there was the idea to do it weekly. It was to get a series of different guests. Like I think if you go back and read the blurb on the website, it gives kind of an indication what the original idea was. There was a lot of I enjoyed talking to X number of people, and those people I think it'd be interesting to put on a podcast. So that was the idea. You know, I always drop into conversation when talking to our mutual friend, Mr. Thomas Quinn, that he is responsible for possibly one of the highest rated podcasts. It's all down the side of the SoundCloud. You get like little bits of like snippets and insights and things. And on highest rated, his podcast always sits in the top 3. So that's always like an amusing thing to see each time. So yeah, I was like, it's 50% would be, but I think it's bordering more like 60%.
Well, obviously, so there was the first couple will have just been the sort of the just like the interview style sort of format where it was a case of what podcast do you listen to, like where's your sort of interest in it come from,
yeah,
etc. etc. And then obviously, I don't know if it was, I don't know if I'd mentioned it to you as an idea that you like to sort of get more content out there. You could potentially look at doing like football, and then obviously mentioned it to Panas. He was up for doing it because obviously for people who've been around since the beginning, obviously Zoom wasn't really like, it was obviously a thing. It obviously existed, but it didn't exist in as much as we weren't using it because we were doing it in person.
Yeah.
I don't know if we ever actually covered this on the podcast, but Zoom probably saved me having to invest in some form of sort of treatment or something like that, because obviously we'd go to your house, we'd record, and I would invariably go back to my parents' house where I was living at the time, and my mum would be horrified at the fact that I'd walk in looking somewhat like the Elephant Man, as I'd had a massive allergic reaction to one of your pets.
Many animals.
One of your many animals.
Many animals. The fact, the thing that always amused me was the fact that my animals absolutely loved you. It was like they knew. They were like, "Hey, he looks allergic. Let's get him."
This is a guy who we absolutely can't go anywhere near. Yeah, I'm going to rub myself all over him. And if anything, I'll just try and put as much of my DNA on anything that he will touch for the next hour to 3 hours.
Absolutely. I think the way
at this point, I would just give a little special shout out. Obviously, he's not on the episode, but he is a regular on the podcast. He'll be into the 300s at least. Obviously, Mr. Stuart Wundenseat, massive shout out to him because back in the early days, he would obviously drive across from Hull to do the podcasts in person.
So recently, I've thought about this, and admittedly, it was the wrestling podcast, and it's like once every 6 weeks. But he would drive from Hull to York, knock out a couple of hours worth of podcast, and drive back to Hull. And as somebody who has driven to Hull on more than one occasion, I can say it's one of the worst drives known to man. It's awful. That road is the worst. But then I started thinking about it, I was like, wasn't there a point in time where Matt was also making the journey?
So Matt would come sort of occasionally, but it tended to be more when there was like other stuff on at the same time. So Matt would, I think Matt maybe came for like the occasional one where he would just come and then just go back. But it usually was that the three of us were going to a beer festival. Was usually the case.
Yeah.
And it was always a case of us three would go to the beer festival, but there was definitely one on. I remember a Saturday afternoon we sort of just like all mob landed at your house, and it was a case of right, should we knock out a couple of podcasts? And you were like, absolutely.
Oh, that's mine for podcasts.
And then we obviously went to our beer festival or our beer day in York, and invariably you would come and join us for a couple of non-alcoholic beverages.
Like, I will be enjoying a non-alcoholic beverage shortly. I had an absolute banger of a non-alcoholic beverage the other evening, and it was at the point that I was like turning the can round because I was trying to work out what it actually was. I'm turning it, and I sort of turned it and went, shit, is that a Christmas tree? I'm thinking must have been a festive beer, which I will hold my hands up on this. I am still working through festive beer. I'm like, that's a Christmas beer. Why is there a Christmas beer in the fridge?
Somewhere, if you listen carefully, Stu is horrified to hear that you were entertaining a festive beer.
Absolutely. I just picture the vomiting scene from Team America. I think back to the in-person podcast with such a mixture of how the hell we managed it, how on earth. Well, obviously, when not to go into too much, but when the world shut down, as I think we could all understand what that means, it was, what does this mean for podcasting? And this was across the board for like from your little ditty podcasts all the way up to the big boys. And then somebody was like, "We'll just switch to video." And now there are podcasts out there, including ours, that hold on to that video element for not necessarily dear life, but I know like companies that switch to like a video podcast way of doing things going forward to cut down on like travel costs, carbon footprint, etc., etc. But because we tried like 2 or 3 different ones, and obviously no plug this end, but we did land on Zoom as a platform because it gave us what we needed at the time. It had multiple functions, and for all all its dues, it still does. It still holds the podcast up from a particular end. But yeah, I honestly don't know what we would have done had we not had that availability. We switched to video fairly quickly in the process, and that was one tiny little camera that I put on a tiny. I think I used to just put it on a shelf, or I was saying, like, I remember, I think back to when me and you used to go to a mutual friend's house and podcast when they just weren't there, and it would be like a camera on a shelf somewhere, and I was like, right, I need another camera. And then next thing it was like, there's 4 cameras, 4 tripods. They're all at different angles. They're all pointed in different directions. And just the amount of coding, video editing, and all like trying to get the audio lined up with like 4 different videos, the insanity that went with that. Then switching to Zoom and going, one video. Cool, that's going to make things a hell of a lot easier. And recently, Zoom have changed the way they do audio. So previously, Zoom audio was in a particular format, but now it's changed and it's in a compatible format with the audio program that I use. So it's still evolving, it's still going in the right direction. But yeah, thinking back to, obviously, the wrestling, I always think that the wrestling one was one that came up early. In its previous guise of let's get ready to rumble. And yeah, even then it was just me and you talking wrestling. So, I'm with you. Hats off to Stu for taking the reins on that one. And I always sort of try and explain to people that it's not. It's almost like the definition of wrestling. It's not scripted, but it is written. Like Stu puts the shit sort of work into bringing the wrestling podcast to us every 6 weeks or whatever. And he is writing it for days, and that's all the news, all the like any people that have been dropped by the company, any changes, any like major events that have happened. Then it's what happened in the last pay-per-view, premium live event, and then going through the next one and keeping the book up to date and stuff. So it's a big job. But from trying not to dwell on it as a point in time, because I know that, like, podcasting / internet / YouTube get funny when you mention certain points in time. But from a mental health perspective, going through that time, I know I personally had this kind of, like, everything that I was doing at that point in time got shut down. I just hit this stride with the gym. I was going to the gym at a particular time every day. I was hitting it hard. I was getting back in the zone, having come off the back of like a variety of different sort of blips in time and stuff like that. Podcasting was going well. I was getting that flow for that. And it was everything just went, and we're closed. The gym shut. Podcasting shut down. So it was trying to put those pieces back together, and like from a mental health perspective, I've spoken to people. I've done podcasts with people where we've had long sort of conversations about podcasting with mental health, and getting through that sort of that time. I don't know, like. Well, I don't know your thoughts, feelings, opinions around the mental health side of podcasting. I know, obviously, for me, it got me through pretty dark times, and then we moved into a dark time because everything was shut. So having that 1, 2, 3, plus times a week, keeping that conversation going, help with that side of things, being able to put a gym in at home and stuff like that. But yeah, I didn't know sort of your feelings from that time. I think it's sort of a defining time. And I was, like I say, I was certainly pleased to be able to continue through that time. Like I say, from many.
Yeah, it was strange because I think obviously it all sort of came about so quickly because obviously it was a case of like one day it was business as usual, then the next day it was go home, take your laptop home with you, do your work as normal, but don't really leave your house unless you absolutely have to. And like it was when the sort of the queuing to actually get into the supermarket came in, where it was just like, oh, okay, this is big, this is proper sort of, yeah, this is something like we've probably need to be taken a bit more seriously.
Queuing to get into the supermarket to get even more toilet roll, yeah.
But that was it, wasn't it? You'd go straight in, and then obviously the first thing you'd see would be the empty shelves where all the toilet roll used to be.
All the pasta's gone.
Yeah. Thankfully, we never got to that point. We never into it's like any bulk buying or that because we were just like, well, we'll just buy the stuff that we need when we need it and stuff like that. But yeah, so I think the one thing that most people were like sort of looking forward to sort of getting through the weeks was that more often than not, most people organise like a Friday evening call, or I know we certainly did it with a couple of different groups of people. We did like a quiz, stuff like that. We had us personally. We had one where it was myself, you, Mr. Panas, Mr. Dench, Mr. Muscroft, and assorted others who were sort of picked up along the way. One of the better things we did actually, to sort of bring it back around to the sort of the beer thing, was when we did a lead tasting box. Was it North?
It was like a virtual brewery tour.
Yeah.
They send you a box of beer and some snacks and stuff. And I was like, I mean, I'll join in, but I don't drink. But they were like, it's fine, we've got you covered. We can send you some stuff. They're like, I mean, cool, sounds great. But they just sent me a load of non-alcoholic beers. I was like, sweet. So it was such time. I had this real mix because viewing, like podcast viewing from a YouTube perspective, was never higher than it was through like you could physically see the moment in time the world reopened because the podcast views just went. I was like, oh, nobody's trapped inside anymore listening to us talk about wrestling. Obviously, you've had a sort of change, lifestyle change. You've had over the last few years, like getting married, adding to the family. I know from the perspective of when I added more family members, you have to have that conversation. You never know how to bring it up by going, will I still be able to do my podcast? that difficult, because it's just like, one night a week or something, is that possible? And Leanne being Leanne was just like, yes, you'll still be able to fit podcasted in because I imagine it'll be at the point in time that it'll be bath time and I'll just go and bath the child and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, that's good then. And then, rolling that dice again and being like, so, and by that point she was just like, we managed last time, it'll be fine. Just You've Gone podcast. So, I mean, you haven't missed any. There's not been a point where you've been like, not going to be podcasting for at least 3 weeks because, maybe.
I think I potentially may have missed like one or two when he was first born. I say first born like he was born a second time. When he was initially born. I mean, obviously to pull the curtain back somewhat, we do most of our recording like midweek. So the fact that he came on a Friday helped that out quite a lot, because obviously that meant that he was like almost the furthest point away from the next week's sort of recording like schedule. But yeah, obviously because he was a bit premature, he spent the first 10 days in the hospital. So I was obviously back and forth to see him, and my wife actually was in the hospital for about 5 days in the intervening time as well. So she didn't come home. Well, neither one of them came home at first. So it was kind of a weird thing in which I think I might have done it in the first week because I couldn't do anything else in that kind of sort of weird way. It was like kind of like a good distraction really, because I couldn't see him because he was in the unit at the hospital. I mean that's probably wrong. I probably could have gone in and seen him if I wanted to, but I think they sort of said you can need to sort of try and go in, get some rest and stuff like that if you can. Like that's kind of why we're here for the sort of the unit and stuff like that. And then obviously because my wife wasn't here, I was kind of sort of running the house like on my own, trying to sort of get it all set up because, like we said, the baby had come premature. And there was a couple of other things we hadn't really got around to get set up, so I was kind of coming home. I wasn't working because I'd been given the time. I'd been given the time off. I mean, I took it as holiday, but they granted me the time off. It was very nice of them. So at least I was sort of able to get stuff done around the house. But like I say, when it came to it, the podcast was actually quite nice because like for like an hour or so, I could sort of switch on and sort of not have to sort of think about all that stuff. So that was kind of good from that regard. But I'd say it's got to the point now where I'm surprised that I didn't miss more in a kind of a weird way, because it's got to the point now where he's more in a routine now, where he's already in bed by the time we start recording, and he's at the point where he'll sleep long enough where we can get the recording done, and then if he does wake up, the recording's all finished and stuff like that, so I can sort him out then. Whereas obviously at the start, that was less likely to be the case because he was going to be up every sort of like 2 to 3 hours and feed.
Yeah, I mean, it's that thing, isn't it? You've got it in your head that you're going to be like, oh, I can't do this because of this, and I can't do that because of that, and then you realize that like routine kind of falls in line on its own. As long as you can sort of get to it and stick to it, then you can say, well, in actual fact, between these 2 hours, he's definitely, a child is definitely going to be asleep. And those 2 hours just so happen to be the exact 2 hours that I need to get a podcast in. So why wouldn't I just do it then? And this was what I was going through some old photos. I'd been trying to do something with my phone to try and get some videos off it, and it was like, oh, let's load all 20,000 photographs one at a time. So I was basically watching my life for the last like 5 years go by. And there was a point in time where there was like a picture / video that I'd sent to our group of me coding a podcast with a baby in a bouncy chair next to me going, this is podcasting from now on, I guess. And, all that sort of stuff. It just kind of, you fit it in. And yeah, like you say, you're always amazed that you don't miss more. Like, oh, I definitely won't be doing that when the baby comes, or I'll never be able to fit that in. And then you're like, oh, it kind of just works. So yeah, it's. I wondered if you'd be in a position where you were like, look, guys, I'm just gonna say it now. Don't you know? Don't count me in for podcasts for the next month. I just need to get a routine sorted. I need to get this settled. I need to get this sorted. And that wasn't the case. And I know that we had like there was like a break in the football and things like that. Obviously, wrestling, whatever.
That was something else I was going to bring up. Obviously, he came sort of at the perfect sort of time, really, because he was in the football off season. So we never really had stuff scheduled in for that time anyway. So it almost sort of like was perfectly timed, really.
It's like he knew. So going back to talking about Zoom, we are under time restraints around our Zoom usage, and we are coming up against one of those restraints right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to step away momentarily, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to play a game. And I'm hoping this is going to kind of be a bit of fun. So you won't need to do anything because we'll just be back in a second. I'm going to get a drink and we're going to play a little game. So we'll see you in 1 second. I don't like the way it does that these days. It makes it sound like it's all gone wrong. And then it's like, oh, recording in progress. It's like, we are back. Firstly, cheers to you, sir. Thank you very much for coming on. Oh, hey.
Look at that.
The words of the character titles.
Look at that thing of beauty.
I'll have a pint of the black stuff, please. You can't drink pint of Bovril. So,
do you know what? I'd have a damn good go. I always maintain. I'm pretty sure I've brought this on one podcast before. I still maintain that if you were hungover, probably the last thing you'd ever think to want to drink. But Bovril, probably not the worst idea.
That's salty goodness. So, I had a little idea. It might work, it might not. I thought it'd be a bit of fun. I thought it would open up the channels, let's say. So, here's the premise. A absolutely reputable company come to you and say, right, we're prepared to offer you £1 million if you would take part in a social experiment. And that social experiment is you have to go and live on a desert island for 1 year. Okay? So this is kind of, it's like a bit of like a desert island discs kind of situation. So you will be provided with a television set, but the television set will only receive something that you have previously designated. And I have a list, which we will go through. There are speakers situated throughout the island, which will play music, but only music that you have previously designated. And there will be food and drink provided. Now, so that we're all clear on this one, basic needs are taken care of. There will be things like airdrops, and there is going to be a hatch. You know the thing if you need to send food from like one floor to another?
The dumbwaiter.
That's the guy. There'll be one of those, but it'll come out of the ground. So it'll be like a hatch that comes out of the ground. You can open it and remove one of the items from this list.
Very much akin to how the food and stuff will be served in, say, Red Dwarf, for example.
Very much so. So things like they will calculate your height, body weight, and etc., and then provide you with the exact amount of water which has been infused with things like electrolytes, stuff like that, every single day. That will just be available. There might even be a tap, and they will say, you need to drink this much. We will monitor it to make sure that you are fit and healthy and whatever. The social experiment side of it is, can you last with just the items you designated before leaving to go to the desert island? So, first up is an entertainment part of the portion of the island. Your TV will receive one wrestling match. It can be any wrestling match from history, but it will be the only wrestling match it will ever get over the course of a year.
Ooh.
Now then, it's entirely up to you. You can mull this one over now and give me an answer, or I can give you some of the other things that you need to think about, because the list, it's extensive.
So, if you'd have said one football match,
You beat me to it, because that's one of the other things. Because I was like, of all the hundreds of thousands of football matches in history, I imagine that not only will you know one, you'll probably be able to go to it like that.
so there's I obviously, like, I'd say it's probably exclusively sort of to football fans that you would usually pick a game that's the most of like historical significance to your particular team. I mean, you might occasionally just get like sort of generic football fans that would pick like a big game that's stuck in their memory as like a game that they remember watching or something like that. But obviously, for me, I would link it to either a Middlesbrough or Hartlepool United game that I've actually either one that I've been to or one that's like the most historically significant in the club's history. When it comes to wrestling, that's a bit more difficult because obviously you've got the nuances of the people that are in the match, the possibility that there's people that have sort of got involved with the match that were supposed to be involved with the match. Length of the match is obviously a thing because like, do you want one that goes for sort of, it's only like 6 to 8 minutes long, and then obviously that's just going to sort of like just be playing like on a bit of a loop. Or do you want to go for one that's a bit more sort of in like the sort of the 40-minute range, and they obviously like takes a bit more time, but obviously has like sort of the build of the sort of the crescendo, as it were.
You see, for me, mine was always the same. Unfortunately, it featured someone who I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to mention nowadays. So I'm a bit scuppered on that one. They'll be like, "Oh, which wrestling match you want?" I'll be like, "Can I write it down?"
Right then, so well, there's a couple of people that have been sort of like erased from history, so to speak.
Let's put it this way: it's the most recent one that's been erased from history.
Right, I was going to say because it's either going to be one who was erased because of family reasons, let's put it that way, and there's another guy who's been erased because he's involved with the guy that used to own the company.
His text message history is probably not the best read. It's that one. It's that guy. He was.
Is it the match he had against John Cena?
No, I think I've mentioned this in the past. It's the match he had with the Big Show, where he suplexed him off the top rope and the ring collapsed. Because
gotcha.
To that point, I always felt like that was like just a massive moment in wrestling history. I think we've spoken about it before. I think it wasn't the first time the ring had collapsed and stuff like that, but at that point in time, it was just like, what the fuck? What the fuck? Okay, so you've got a couple of entertainment items to mull over. Let's go to a completely different end of the spectrum. I need from you not one, not two, but 3 different meals that are going to cover 3 specific things. So, 5 days a week, you will eat a readily prepared meal. You have no say in anything. You can just say, I want, mash and onion gravy and peas and chicken breast. And that is the meal you will eat for 5 days, Monday to Friday. So I need to know, what is the meal that you can eat for 5 days a week that is just a readily prepared meal. It's just produced, it's there in front of you, you eat it and you move on with your life. Second meal I need to know is, on a Saturday night, you will be provided with all of the ingredients required and facilities to cook your own meal. But as previously mentioned, it can only be one thing. You can't say, oh, well, I can use these ingredients to produce this meal, but secretly I can also turn it into this meal. It has to be the same meal. You just get, because obviously we're talking about a social experiment, you get the option to make your own meal. Psychologically, it's like, oh, I'm going to chop it this way this week, but it's still the same meal. I'm going to cut this into a star, but it's still fish and chips or whatever. And your third and final meal on a Sunday night, you will be provided with a takeaway of your choice. As previously mentioned, it has to be the same takeaway every time, and it can't be, well, I'm going to order from this place because they do Chinese fish and chips and pizza. It has to be, I want a pepperoni pizza from this place. So those are other things to mull. So far, you've got the one football match you will watch for a year, the one wrestling match you will watch for a year, and your 3 meals. But there are still other things on the list. This is a social experiment, and we need to know how you will cope. Do you have an answer for me?
Right, so I'll give you the football match first. This probably won't go down as much of a surprise. Well, actually, no. So I think a lot of people, like obviously people who are new around here, that haven't been watching the football podcast for the last 6, 7 seasons that we've been doing it. Obviously, I am a Middlesbrough fan. And in Middlesbrough's entire history, they have won 1 trophy, which was the English League Cup final in 2004. Strange in the fact that it was won on Leap Day, in that it was won on the 29th of February.
29th. Nice.
So a little sort of quirk of the calendar there, as it were. So a lot of people would probably expect to pick that game. But 2 years after they won the League Cup, they through winning the League Cup, they actually qualified for the European competition called the UEFA Cup. The first season they win the UEFA Cup, they had a lot of games against European teams, won some of them, lost against others, eventually went out of the competition in the round of 16. The year after that, they went on a bit of a crazy run and got all the way to the final, which, to say it was only the team's second year in the competition, was pretty impressive. To do it in both the quarter-final and the semi-final, they found themselves 3-0 down, needing to score 4 goals to go through, and they basically did it on both occasions with about 30 seconds or so to spare in the game. So I could take the quarterfinal against Basel, or I could take the semi-final against Steaua Bucharest. I'd probably take the second game because in my head that was the one where it was kind of, well, they've done it once. There's absolutely no chance they can do this again. There's just no way they can get that sort of lucky and fortunate stuff like that. I wasn't able to be at the game because I was it was my first year at university actually, and I seem to remember being in the the sort of the university like bar watching the game, and I distinctly like remember sort of like getting like goosebumps on my arm and like the sort of the tingling feeling. There was even people in the bar watching the game. I swear didn't even like football, and they just got that caught up with it because like it was like, oh god, they need a goal, or they're attacking, they're really going for it and stuff like that. So the game I'd go for would be, I think it was Middlesbrough 4, Steaua Bucharest 2 in like April of 2006 in the semi-final of the UEFA Cup. That'd be a football game. Wrestling match, that's a bit more tricky because, like I said, you've got all the sort of the nuances and stuff like that. Obviously, this is gonna date the podcast somewhat, but we've just come off the back of the latest premium live event in the WWE called Elimination Chamber.
Yeah, we did.
To say that a generational thing happened would probably be an understatement of the decade.
I honestly not to do anything spoiler based, but I'm not sure how I feel about it. That's not even true. That's not even remotely true. I know exactly how I feel about it. I don't like it. I would like it all to go back to the way it was, please, because I don't like it. Was it? It must have been last year's WrestleMania when they just had like that, when it was just like bang, 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 bang. I think I said at the time, because obviously the Dwayne was there wreaking havoc as always. I think the moment when the light went out and the gong kicked in, I'm pretty sure if you'd have got a ruler out, you could have measured the hair on my arms about an inch, because I was just like, this could be the best moment, because it was just, it was almost like a culmination of so much, like generation wise, so many eras just all just clashing. That it still stands out. And I know, like, obviously we both brought sort of very recent things. Like I say, I don't think I'm allowed my previous answer anymore. So I'm always like, so yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You think about all of the wrestling that you could pick from.
Yeah,
It kind of says something if you're thinking about like current.
So this was going to be my point. So like so technically, I can't pick that because that was after a match. So that was technically that was a segment. So what I was going to sort of bring it back to was the one I'd probably pick would be Bash at the Beach in 1996 when it was Sting, Macho Man Randy Savage, and Lex Luger versus Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and their mystery third partner, which never actually sort of culminated in anyone coming down. The match sort of went ahead. I think it was. Oh, I need to watch this back because I can't remember if it was Luger or Sting that got taken out of the match. And then so it ended up just being Savage and then one of the other two against Hall and Nash. And then at some point Hulk Hogan sort of like
I was going to
makes
say,
his way
wasn't it
down,
Hulk Hogan that was the mystery special guest?
and Hulk Hogan turned out to be the third man.
Yeah.
And I think it widely goes down as like sort of like one of the most like shocking moments in wrestling history, because it was the first time in like 15 years or so that Hulk Hogan had been a bad guy on screen and stuff like that. And the reaction was quite something, because there was a guy who tried to get in the ring to get him,
Yeah.
and he basically just got the shit kicked out of him.
Yeah, and this was I've seen this recently. I'm pretty sure it's in I think it's in the Vince documentary. This was at a point in time that wasn't we've had somebody come up from the crowd kind of situation. It was very much that was a genuine person who genuinely tried to get in the ring, and they were like, "Nah, we're having none of it." I don't think they covered like. Obviously, you don't know what that person's intentions are. Do they just want to be part of it, or are they there to do harm? And yes, you're talking about giant men who could take you apart. All it takes is for that person to have a weapon of some description, and it's a different conversation. So they didn't take any chances with it and made sure that person wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, other than maybe.
Right.
Okay, so good, couple of good choices. You've still got your food choices, so let's jump over to a completely different format. Through the speakers dotted around the island, there will be which album playing?
That's such a hard one, because do you pick something that's like got a bit of variety to it? I think obviously it'd be a massive cop out to say like, now that's what I call music 16 or something like that. Also, just a quick shout out to anyone who's old enough to actually get that reference, because I'm pretty sure the mix CD, the pre-done mix CD, no less, that you used to be able to buy at All Good Track Records, insert name of record shop here.
Absolutely not. You were getting down Saturday morning to Woolworths. You were getting in there. You were grabbing the latest version of Now Whatever and taking it straight to the tills and paying you $9.99 for a brand new CD.
So when Spotify came out back in the day, the way my mate sort of like explained it to me was like, so obviously it's like you buy more than one CD a month, don't you? I was like, yeah, I guess. And he's like, well, if you do, then you're better off just paying for Spotify, because you get more value. And I was like, yeah, he's probably not wrong there, actually. Right. Oh, tough one. What's the album? What I said, I need to think that. What's the album that I've played more than any other album? See, ironically, this is where Spotify would probably help, because they'd probably be able to tell me what album I played more than any.
This is the album you listen to the most. Because the way I work it is there will be like set times for set things. So between the hours of 8 in the morning and whatever time in the afternoon, there'll be music playing. It'll be the same album. I don't think I would necessarily do it's on a loop, because no matter what the album is, it's drive you absolutely over the wall. But obviously it is a social experiment, so that's part of it. But I think it will be played like once an hour, every couple of hours, between 8 and 5 every day. Then the TV becomes active between 5 and midnight, let's say. So you're not having it properly rammed down your throat, but you also don't have the option to turn it off, and you don't have a say whether it gets turned on. So you've got that. Because I was like, do you pick an album that you've been listening to for 30 years and you know that there's absolutely no point in time that you wouldn't want to listen to it? Or do you pick an album that, like for me, I've been listening to the same album in the car for like 2 years at this point. I'm literally just driving around like, I should probably change the music. I imagine like the children are sat in the car like, I wish you'd change this fucking CD. And I'm just like,
So I think I'm going to go with the former. So I'm going to go with an album that like I very rarely get tired of. It's by a band called Thrice, and I believe it's their second album. It's called The Artist in the Ambulance, and it's one of those albums where. So, whilst this was a question my friend used to sort of like pose all the time, and it was if you had sort of the chance to say win like £1 million or something, but you have to name each song off an album in order, and you can't get any wrong. Sort of, what would be your most confident guess at getting that correct? Whilst I still wouldn't be able to do that because names of songs on albums just disappear into the ether. It's the album where I've said this to my wife on several occasions. If I ever hear certain songs, if I don't hear the next song that's scheduled on the album next, that song sounds weird to me. I don't know if you ever get that.
yeah. Metallica once put it into the perspective that an album is technically a story, and if you listen to that story out of order, then you're not getting the right. It's like reading the wrong chapter in a book. You just haven't got a clue what's going on. Yeah, I know we tried to do it, and I said at the time, I was like, there's a couple of albums that I think I'd have a good run at, but I don't think I'd be able to do it. And I think in the end, I picked Master of Puppets, which I'm pretty sure has got 8 tracks, and I didn't get it right. So it was that. This is the album I probably know the best, and it's got next to no tracks, and I still didn't manage to do it. It was like, shit.
It's because, like, but if someone was to come up to you and say, like, could you hum me the album from start to finish? Could do that for you, no bother. I could probably do I could do the key changes. I could do sort of when the drum fills come in and stuff like that. But it's because like I'll be tripped up by like a rogue sort of like 7th album song that's called like Left Cheek Bollock Nature or something like that. That I've never looked at the actual name of it before. I just know what it sounds like.
Yep.
But yeah, for anyone who's never listened to that album before, it's a bit heavy but excellent, very very good. Would very much recommend listening to that.
Okay, so now, do you have any of your food choices for
me? So what was it? It was 5 times a week. It's just ready. Just comes to me.
Yeah, it's like you have like a tray. You lift the lid, and it's just the meal. But it's 5 days a week, every week for a year.
So it's something that it needs to be something that I could eat on the reg and very rarely get bored.
Yeah.
Okay. Probably going to be a slightly odd one. But oddly enough, bringing it back to when we were sort of locked up and unable to leave the house as much as we wanted to. I found myself into a bit of a pattern where my dinner on a regular basis whilst working was salmon and couscous. So I got into a bit of a routine of going I knew when my lunch was going to be. So 15 minutes before my lunch was going to be, I'd go and turn the oven on. Then I'd go and put the salmon in, and then that would cook whilst I was either taking my calls or doing whatever it was that I needed to do. And then my lunch break would start, and then I'd have to go and make my couscous up. Hot water, pack it, blah blah blah. 5 minutes, done. And I must have had that 2 times a week for 6 months. Never once got bored of it. Really, really enjoy that meal. So yeah, I'll go salmon and couscous.
Very nice. This is where things are going to get a little bit trickier, mostly because One of them, I think you'll do fine. The other, I imagine this might be where things stumble. Back in the entertainment district, your TV will have one TV episode and one movie. Now, TV episode, I imagine you're not going to struggle too much. As far as the movie category, I think that's where we might have a stumble.
TV. What have I watched more than anything else? So I'd say the series that I've probably watched more than anything is either Frasier or Arrested Development, or maybe Modern Family. But like with them, I wouldn't say there's like an episode that ever sort of like stands out as being sort of like the one that you have to watch. I might have to come back to the TV show. Film wise, this is going to be strange actually, because it kind of links back to like obviously like this isn't going to come out for a couple of weeks, but it comes back to the week just gone's darkest timeline. I would like to select Back to the Future, please.
So, I could dive. No, I'll tell you, I was wearing a Back to the Future t-shirt today, and me and my eldest have completed the Back to the Future trilogy, whilst also splurging £6.50 to be able to play the virtual reality Power Wash Simulator DLC for Back to the Future, and it is fantastic. I cleaned the shit out of that DeLorean last night. The first Back to the Future. So,
although I would happily watch any of the three.
So the conversation
maybe not the third as much as the other two, but
the conversation that I had with my eldest and the statement I made was, if somebody says to you, my favorite Back to the Future is X, they are right and wrong all at the same time. the best Back to the Future is.
Do you think there is an argument you could make that 2 is slightly better than 1 in the fact that they've basically got 2 and 1 running concurrently inside the film?
Obviously, they deal with a lot of, like, I was talking to her at length. I imagine she was riveted by it. But I was saying, like, obviously you've got like that double layer of stuff. And then you've got like the bit right at the very end where Doc's like, see ya. And then Mike comes around the corner and he's just like, what? So yeah, I don't think I'll ever be able to say this one's my favorite, because you've got to go with, well, the first one is just the absolute pinnacle. But there is a world where the second one could be considered to be the best. And also, when you go, well, the first two are that, and then you've got a Western that's still a time travel movie and a love story, and you're just like, and it's a true, I give up on this. I'm never going to be able to tell you which is the best. Fantastic choice, though. Having recently watched those 3 films in HD glory, being able to look at the absolute beauty of those films. Oh, perler of a choice. Do you have either of your other 2 meals?
So the one that I had to cook, I'll go with a sort of a chicken and sausage jambalaya.
Jambalaya, sir? Anytime I ever hear the word jambalaya, all I can think is that bit in Scrubs. Jambalaya.
Jambalaya.
Okay, I'm going to offer you what Leanne's contribution to this list was, and I'm like, damn it. because it should have absolutely been on the list already, and I just couldn't stop kicking myself. Leanne would like to know which beer you'll be accompanying all of your meals with, and I'm like, why didn't I put that on the list?
So, if you'd have asked me this a couple of years ago, it would have been Pump Up the Jam, the Jam Donut Pale Ale by Tiny Rebel.
Oh, yes, sir.
However, over the last sort of like 6 months to a year, I've grown to very much appreciate that. I believe deep down in my soul that my favourite beer is Guinness, and like I know that it's maybe a bit of a cop out, but it's just it's always good. It's very, very occasionally you'll get a bit of a duff pint and stuff like that, but let's be honest,
the irony is that I drink Guinness 5 days a week. I drink Guinness Zero every day, apart from on a weekend when I drink from the stash. So you're absolutely preaching to the choir on that one. I fully support that message. Guinness, even in the zero to me is the closest anybody has ever got to replicating a non-alcoholic beer as close to the alcoholic equivalent. It is, and I will say this, it has gone through a change over the years, and the change made it that much closer. So, football match done, wrestling match done, CD done, movie done, 2 of your 3 meals done, and your beer is answered. So all that's left is TV show and takeaway.
Can I have a few minutes to sort of like mull it over?
Well, I'll allow it because we'll have to take a break. We'll have to break momentarily because of these here constraints. So you are allowed to dip out of the rapid fire section of the podcast and really mull over. Obviously, in our house, this has sparked a fair old conversation, which is why I was like, I think this is like a good thing we could do. I will say this: the TV show section, we were still talking about it at the point in time I pressed record or started the first one of these, because we were like, well, what about this? And yeah, but there's that, and what about that episode of that? So I don't envy your choice because I don't think we actually answered the question, but join us momentarily when Paul attempts to answer the last 2 questions on the list. Back in a moment. I was going to start this bit by whistling the Back to the Future theme tune, but then I was like, probably get into some sort of copyright trouble. Instead, I'm going to start this section by saying, when I was like, oh, one of the albums that the album I attempted to do the name all the songs on was Master of Puppets. I then was informed that Master of Puppets was released on this day 39 years ago, on this day in 1986.
So that is terrifying in the fact that album is technically older than I am.
I would like to say the same, yet I can't. So there's that. But I thought, I was like, that's weirdly poignant. 39 years.
Yeah. It's weird. So, I've got a decision to make on an episode
of a TV series and your final food choice.
I'm gonna have to come back to the TV show because that is before. Right, parameters on the food. So, like we said, it can't just be an item from a takeaway that does like kebabs, pizza, burgers, all that sort of jazz, and I can't change that. If I was to say request a curry, would I have to select the actual dish curry? I can't just get different curries. Right? Okay.
No, it has to be a specific food item from a specific, possibly nameless takeaway, depending on, nameless takeaway. Because for me, mine would be pizza, but it would be a specific pizza from a specific takeaway. That's where I'd be coming.
Yeah.
And obviously, this is the point in time where I have to hide the fact that would only be part of my takeaway.
I love it. That is the answer.
So just be like a start. If I was getting a takeaway, come on. I need the accompanying garlic bread to go with it. Anyway, let's not talk about my horrific eating tendencies.
Right. Let's get down to brass tacks. What is the takeaway that we get more than anything?
So you've got your major food groups. You've got your Chinese, as mentioned, curry, pizza, fish and chips, Thai, which I sometimes forget and wish I wouldn't, because Thai is up there for me. I've been making Thai food recently. I made a Thai green curry last week that was just. You can even dip into things like, obviously, if you can order it, you can class it as takeaway. So like sushi, pretty sure you can do a sushi takeaway. Been dabbling with the sushi recently. It's just outside.
So. I wouldn't say it's something that we get all the time, but when we do get it, I'm annoyed at myself that we don't get it more often. So it's from a place called SFC, which I believe is on Layerthorpe.
Southern Fried Chicken?
Possibly. I don't actually know what it stands for. I just know it's SFC off the old Just Eat. They've probably now changed names actually. But they do a mixed meat shawarma, which is incredible.
All the meat.
Well, I think technically it's just lamb and chicken, but I think there is an option you can throw halloumi in there as well, and get that with all the salad, a little bit of garlic sauce like lashed through it. I'm not against spicy, but for some reason I just prefer to have it without it. But I would happily have the chili sauce on there. Doesn't need it. And I'd just go with the garlic sauce. So I would go with that. I would go with chicken shawarma with chicken and lamb shawarma with halloumi, and then obviously a little side portion of cheesy fries.
You have said the magic word, because if you add halloumi to literally anything, does it dial it up at least 10%?
This was the argument we always had back in the day. It was a case of is there a food drink sort of group that adding cheese doesn't make it 10 times better?
Fruit salad.
Yeah, that was like someone was always like breakfast cereal. Like, well, if we're going to be silly when we're playing this game, then we can play it.
If you're not going to follow the rules.
So that just leaves me with a TV show. Oh,
I was going to say
Christ.
we're now down to what has become the most difficult. Whilst you mull, I did wonder whether we might have seen the mention of show that you and I have both previously shown love for in Cheers. Myself and Lan ended up talking about we both enjoyed the TV show Angel, which was the spin-off of Buffy, and some would say, especially in our house, the better of the two shows. The last episode of that is just phenomenal. I threw out, and get your opinion on this one. I threw out the official last episode of Only Fools and Horses.
Never got into Only Fools and Horses.
Makes me cry every time. Just because I watched Only Fools and Horses all the way through as it sort of aired, especially in the later series and stuff, and then that last obviously they brought it back and just ruined it. But the official last episode was like, going back to Arrested Development. Surely you can throw the pilot in the mix because as strong openings go, the Arrested Development pilot is an absolute banger of an episode. There's a couple of, again, bringing it back to, there's a couple of Red Dwarfs that I'd probably throw into the mix.
Yeah.
I always enjoyed the one that had the 3 Red Dwarfs. And there was the evil one, the good one, and their one.
Yeah.
And they had to visit each other.
That was pretty good. I'd always throw Backwards in.
Oh,
Backwards is always a good one. And then there's the one where Rimmer gets beamed down to the wax, sort of planet or something like that. And he basically turns
clones himself.
He turns it into World War 3 or something like that.
I always like the one where Rimmer gets the virus.
Oh, Mr. Flibble.
But again, if somebody was like, which is the best Red Dwarf episode, then you're just in the weeds.
There's definitely going to be TV shows that I've watched on more than one occasion, never got bored of, but yet happily sort of started over and over again. There's episodes I'd happily just sit and rewatch Brooklyn Nine-Nine over and over and over again.
Something I showed to my children at regular intervals, because it comes up so many times as it is listed as one of the best cold openings of any series, is the opening of the Brooklyn Nine-Nine episode where they're doing the lineup. And the woman's like, I never saw his face, but I knew he was singing along to the music. And it's the Backstreet Boys, and he gets them to sing along to the Backstreet Boys, and they're all singing. And it just finishes with the woman going, "It was number 4. Number 4 killed my brother." And he's like, "Oh, I completely forgot about that." But again, I always enjoy the when Terry's trying to build the dollhouse. Yeah. And he's got the 3-sided screw, and he's like, how does this screw into anything? Because at the time I saw that episode, I'd had that. I was trying to build something that had a screw that would not, physics and this screw were not friends. And then I saw that episode, I was like, holy shit, that was a little too close to home for my life.
Right. Let's stop pussyfooting around. Let's make a decision. Yeah, I'll tell you what, let's go with the final episode of Frasier. probably not like a like one of the better ones, but I know, especially now that they've relaunched the series. But obviously, I'll go with that as opposed to say the last episode of Cheers, because obviously the last episode of Cheers then obviously spills over into the launch of Frasier, so that almost carries on elements of the Cheers story into Frasier, whereas like Frasier ending didn't spin off into something else. If that makes sense.
I think I've mentioned it before, but there's the episode of Frasier where he's in the like a cabin and has to deal with like every ex he's ever had throughout the series in some kind of like some sort of weird hallucination slash fever dream slash journey of like psychological discovery. I always thought that was a good one. That and when Niles and Roz.
Well, they definitely sleep together at some point. I'm pretty sure.
An episode where the episode where they finally get together was always one. So there we go. That is your desert island. Now then, having given all your answers, will you make it the year? Will you see out the year to win £1 million and secure that for your family's future? Will you still be watching that episode of Frasier 364 days later?
No. I think I get, at best, I think I get 4 weeks into that challenge before I have to tap. Just going off the fact that I did 6 weeks in India when I was sent there with work for a transfer of job sort of project, and had discovered after maybe the first 3 days that I had overcommitted to something, and was basically ticking the days off.
We weren't sure we were ever going to see you again. There was a lot of. Do you think he'll come back? It doesn't sound like it's a good time. I think your experience there put me in the camp of if they offer me the chance to go, it's probably going to be a no from me.
Would have been perfectly fine if we were doing 9 a.m. till say 4 p.m. their time, but we weren't. We were doing 9 till 5 our time, which was 12 till 10 their time.
Oh, God.
So we didn't really have a morning because the mornings were technically our only free time, but obviously we were still knackered from the night before because we weren't getting back to the hotel until like 11 o'clock.
Oh,
so
God.
Not the most rewarding of occasions, shall we say.
Obviously, like I say, we've sort of mulled over a few of these things in our house. I think for me, I can tick off the like I say, the CD's the easiest one for me. I've been listening to the same album for 2 years or something. Now, admittedly, it is on a playlist with a series of other albums I've been listening to for the similar length of time, but it is the album that's spoken to me the most in the last few years. I think I'd struggle in the football wrestling category, especially if it was mandatory. I'd be like Man United versus QPR, 1986 or 7 or something, just because I'm there and Man United won. But it was like the meal sort of stuff. I was like, I think there are foods that I could potentially just say I eat that every day because it's a mixture of different flavors and stuff like that. I think it's the weird ones of you're given the ingredients to cook a meal, so you get that opportunity to express yourself, but it's ultimately the same meal. So whereas the first few weeks you'd be looking forward to it, after those few weeks you'd start dreading it, and by the end you'd be like, I don't even want to eat it. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to make it. I don't want to eat it. It's boring. So there are those pitfalls there. Obviously, as long as they're serving me Guinness Zero, I think I'll be all right. Other alcoholic / non-alcoholic beverages are available, just not in my house. That's not true. I've had some absolute bangers recently. There we go. That is the special 300th episode of The Darkest Timeline with my podcast wife, Miss Paul Williams. Look for him on any number of other podcasts that appear on the network. And treat yourself. Go back to that first one when we had almost no idea what we wthat's doing and see if you could tell any different. Yes, all that's left really is for me to thank you for joining me for this episode. Obviously, it does mean a lot to me that you keep coming back every week, more than once sometimes, more than a few times. You don't get to the best part of, well, it's probably at least 600 episodes without coming back week in, week out for more punishment. And yeah, for the YouTube listener, for the audio listener, you actually get to watch this one, so you can still listen to it. But hey, give that YouTube a try. Subscribe while you're there. Just saying. Right, I'm going to release you back into the wilds, and yeah, I will see you later in the week for the football podcast, and I'll see you lovely people on the next episode. Thank you very much, and we shall see you next time. Tatty, bye.
There we go. What do you think of that? That's that one done. 300 episodes of The Darkest Timeline in the bag. Can you believe it? Because I certainly can't. Massive thank you to Paul. Obviously, I think, kind of covered it in that episode, but cannot thank Paul enough. He turns up week in, week out. He imparts all of his football knowledge onto us, onto you guys. He turns up, turns out. Many podcasts would not exist without Paul's help, without him being here to guide me through a variety of different things. So there is not enough thank yous out there. Massive thank you to Paul. Big thank you to you for listening, watching, making it this far. If you did and you haven't already, maybe it's time. Click that like, click that subscribe, become a member of the crew. You know you want to. Leave a review where you can leave a review, and check out the website, thecookiecast.com. There we've got social media links and an email button, and that way you can get in touch with us. Right, that's that. Did you like the format? What did you think to the Desert Island Discs section? Do you want to see more of that? If so, leave us a comment. That's it for this one. Till next time, I'm going to say bye, and I'll see you then.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to Cookie Cast.